Katie Morgan emerged from the tunnels into a world transformed by horror. The surface of Velther Prime was covered in Vraken. Thousands of them, perhaps tens of thousands, swarming over the ruined colony like ants on a carcass. The sky was dark with flying variants, blocking out the sun. The air smelled of ash and something else. Something organic and wrong. At the center of the swarm rose the hive node, a massive organic structure that pulsed with sickly light. It was the brain of the swarm, the thing that coordinated their attacks and processed their collective intelligence. If Rila was right, destroying it would cripple the entire invasion. Katie began moving, using the shadows and debris as cover. The Vraken were everywhere, but they were focused on the tunnel entrances, trying to force their way underground. They did not notice one small human creeping through the chaos. She had covered, perhaps, half the distance when her luck ran out. A Vraken scout spotted her and screamed an alert. Within seconds, dozens of creatures were converging on her position. Katie ran, no longer trying to hide, just trying to get close enough to the hive node before they caught her. She was not going to make it. The first Vraken reached her, and she dodged its attack, sliding under its claws and keeping her momentum. The second caught her across the back, sending her tumbling. She rolled to her feet and kept running, blood streaming from the wound. 20 meters to the hive node. 15, 10. Something heavy slammed into her from behind, driving her to the ground. Claws pinned her down. She struggled, but could not break free. The sonic weapon was still in her hands, so close to the target, but she could not move. This was it. This was how she died. Then the sky split open with fire. Katie looked up and saw something impossible. Ships were descending through the atmosphere. Human ships, their weapons blazing. Orbital bombardment strikes carved paths through the Vraken swarm, incinerating thousands of creatures in seconds. The Vraken holding her down hesitated, confused by the sudden attack. Katie used that moment to twist free, driving her blade into the creature's eye. It screamed and released her. She ran the final distance to the hive node and slammed the sonic weapon against its surface. Her fingers found the activation button and pressed it. The device hummed to life. 30 seconds. Katie ran. Behind her, the sonic weapon began to emit a frequency that human ears could barely detect. But the Vraken heard it. They heard it and they suffered. Across the colony, creatures collapsed, their biomechanical systems disrupted by the sound. The coordinated swarm became a chaotic mass of individual animals, no longer guided by their collective intelligence. The hive node shuddered, cracked, exploded in a burst of organic matter that painted the ground black. Katie was thrown off her feet by the blast. She landed hard, the breath driven from her lungs. Her vision blurred. She could hear screaming, both human and alien, and the thunder of weapons fire. Then someone was lifting her up, strong arms holding her steady. She blinked and saw Danny Cole's battered face looking down at her. "Still alive?" he asked. "Apparently," she managed. "Good, because you are going to want to see this." He helped her stand and turned toward the sky. Human dropships were landing all around them, disgorging Marines in combat armor. The soldiers formed lines and began pushing outward, driving the disoriented Vraken back with disciplined fire. A figure approached through the smoke. A tall man in naval uniform with captain's insignia on his collar. "Lieutenant Commander Morgan?" he asked. Katie straightened, despite the pain. "Yes, sir. Captain Lucas Grant, Human Naval Force." He saluted her with obvious respect. "We received your distress signal and pushed our engines beyond safe limits to get here. Looks like we arrived just in time." "How?" Katie asked. Commander Voss told the fleet not to attempt rescue. Captain Grant smiled grimly. "Commander Voss does not give orders to human ships. And we do not abandon our people. Ever." He looked around at the mixed-species defenders emerging from the tunnels, bloodied and exhausted, but alive. Kelrani soldiers supporting wounded Dorothy. Talaxian engineers helping Bethany civilians. All of them together. All of them survivors. "What you did here," Grant said quietly, standing when everyone else ran, bringing these different species together. "Command is going to want a full report. The news networks are already broadcasting footage of the battle. The whole galaxy is watching." Katie did not know what to say. She had not done this for recognition or fame. She had done it because it was right. The cleanup took hours. The surviving Vraken were hunted down and destroyed. The wounded were evacuated to the human ships for treatment. A count was made of the dead, a long and painful list that included nearly 400 defenders, but more than 1,200 had survived. More than 1,200 people who should have died had lived because they chose to stand together. That evening, Katie gathered the survivors in what remained of the main assembly hall. The ceiling was gone, open to a sky now clear of Vraken. Stars were visible again, clean and bright. "We did something today that has never been done before," Katie told them. "We stood against the Vraken and we won. Not because humans are special, or Kelrani are special, or any single species is special. We won because we were all special together." She looked out at the faces watching her. Kethran, his wounds bandaged but his eyes proud. Rila Ven, exhausted but satisfied. Zivka, young and changed forever by what he had experienced. "The galaxy will remember this day," Katie continued. "They will remember that a colony of abandoned workers and stubborn volunteers held the line when empires would have fled. They will remember that different species can work as one when they choose to. They will remember that hope is not foolishness, but the most powerful weapon we have." Zithka stepped forward. "Among my people, we have a word for what you showed us," he said. "It translates roughly as the strength of those who choose. You chose to stay. You chose to fight. You chose to believe when belief seemed impossible. That choice changed everything." Katie felt tears finally spilling down her cheeks. She did not try to stop them. "I did not do this alone," she said. "None of us did. That is the whole point. Alone, we are prey. Together, we are something more." 3 days later, as the human fleet prepared to depart Velther Prime, Katie received a message from Galactic Union Command. 3 more colonies had requested human military advisors. 5 species had expressed interest in forming mixed-unit defense forces. The model they had created here, born of desperation and hope, was spreading across the galaxy. Commander Voss had sent a personal message as well. It contained no apology, but it did contain an admission that he had underestimated what was possible. Coming from a Kelrani, that was significant. Katie stood on the bridge of Captain Grant's ship, watching Velther Prime shrink behind them. The colony would be rebuilt. The dead would be honored. The story would be told. Mira joined her at the viewport. "What are you thinking about?" Myra asked. Katie smiled. "I am thinking about what comes next. The Vraken are still out there. There are more colonies, more people who might need help. More monsters to stand against. And you want to be there when they need standing against?" "I think I have to be. We showed the galaxy something important today. We showed them that running is not the only option. Now we have to keep showing them. We have to spread the idea until it becomes something the Vraken cannot stop." Myra nodded. "The strength of those who choose. Exactly." Katie turned away from the viewport and faced forward toward whatever challenges awaited. The Vraken think they are hunting prey. They are wrong. The prey has learned to bite back, and humanity is just getting started. The ship jumped to faster than light speed, carrying its crew toward the next mission, the next battle, the next chance to prove. That true power is not found in weapons or numbers. True power is found in the choice to stand when running would be easier. True power is found in fighting for, Strangers because they are worth fighting for. True power is found in hope. And humanity had plenty of that to share. The first wave hit like a hammer. Katie Morgan watched from the forward observation post as the Vraken descended through the atmosphere in a swarm of black shapes. They were worse than the reports described. Each creature was roughly the size of a ground vehicle, covered in biomechanical armor that shifted and adapted as it moved. They had too many limbs, too many eyes, and mouths filled with teeth designed to tear through metal. The outer defensive line opened fire immediately. Mining lasers converted to weapons slashed through the first ranks of attackers, cutting down dozens of creatures. For a brief moment, Katie allowed herself to hope. Then the Vraken adapted. Their armor shifted, becoming more reflective, deflecting the laser fire. They changed their approach angle, coming in low and fast, using the terrain as cover. Within minutes, the outer line was overwhelmed. All units, fall back to secondary positions, Katie ordered. Repeat, fall back to secondary positions. The retreat was chaos. Defenders streamed toward the tunnel entrances, while Vraken poured over the abandoned barricades. Katie saw a Vethany worker get separated from his group, surrounded by 3 creatures. Before she could react, Kethran charged out of nowhere, his massive body crashing into the attackers, buying the worker time to escape. The Dorothy was wounded in the exchange. Deep gouges across his shoulder, but he did not slow down. He grabbed the injured Vethany and carried him towards safety, roaring defiance at the pursuing swarm. Katie and Danny held the entrance to Tunnel 7 while the last defenders streamed past them. The Vraken were close now, close enough that Katie could see the intelligence in their eyes. These were not mindless beasts. They were calculating, coordinating, learning. A creature lunged at Danny. He sidestepped the attack and drove his blade into the gap between its armor plates. The Vraken screamed, a sound that hurt to hear, and collapsed. 2 more took its place immediately. "We need to move," Danny shouted over the noise. Katie fired 3 more shots, then followed him into the tunnel. Behind them, the blast doors slammed shut, sealing off the surface. They were underground now, in the maze of passages where they hoped to make their stand. The next 6 hours were a nightmare of running, battles, and desperate defense. The Vraken pursued them through the tunnels, but the confined spaces worked against the creatures. They could not use their numbers effectively, forced to attack in smaller groups that the defenders could handle. The mixed species teams that Katie had organized proved their worth. Kelrani marksmen provided covering fire, while Dorothy fighters held choke points. The Laxian engineers collapsed tunnels behind them, sealing off routes. Danny Cole became a legend during those hours. He seemed to be everywhere at once, rallying defenders, plugging gaps in the line, leading counterattacks when positions were about to be overrun. Katie lost count of how many times she saw him go down, struck by claws or thrown against walls, only to get back up and keep fighting at one choke point. Danny held the line alone for nearly 7 minutes, while civilians evacuated through a side passage. When Katie finally reached him with reinforcements, he was barely standing, covered in his own blood and the black fluid that served the Vraken as blood. "Took you long enough," he managed to say before collapsing into her arms. Katie handed him off to a medic and took his position. The Vraken kept coming, wave after wave, seemingly endless. But they were slowing. The tunnels were confusing them, disrupting their coordination. The defenders were bleeding them, killing creatures faster than they could adapt. It was not enough. Katie knew it was not enough. They were buying time, but time would eventually run out. "Morgan, this is Ven." Rila's voice crackled over the communicator. "The sonic weapon is ready, but I need to reconfigure it based on actual Vraken biometrics. I need a live sample." Katie felt cold. "You need someone to capture one of those things alive." Yes, or at least bring me tissue samples from a fresh kill. The older corpses have degraded too much. Katie looked around at her exhausted defenders. They had been fighting for hours without rest. Asking any of them to go hunting for Vraken samples seemed impossible. I will get it myself, she said. Negative, Zithka interrupted. You are needed to command. I will go. Before Katie could argue, the young Kalrani was moving, slipping through the tunnels with the natural stealth of his species. Katie watched him disappear into the darkness, her heart tight with worry. 30 minutes later, Zithka returned, dragging a wounded Vraken behind him. The creature was still alive, thrashing weakly against its bonds. Zithka was wounded badly, one arm hanging useless at his side, but his compound eyes were bright with triumph. Fresh enough? He asked. Rila examined the creature with clinical detachment. Yes, this will work. Give me 2 hours. Those 2 hours were the longest of Katie's life. The Vraken pressure was increasing, their attacks becoming more coordinated. They had learned the tunnel layout now, were finding ways around the blocked passages. The defensive perimeter was shrinking. Ket Aran found Katie during a brief lull in the fighting. The Dorothy was covered in wounds, but he seemed not to notice them. We cannot hold much longer, he said. The creatures are breaking through in Sector 9. We do not have enough fighters to plug every gap. Katie nodded. I know. Rila is almost ready with the sonic weapon. If it works, it might buy us more time. And if it does not work? Katie met his eyes. Then we make our last stand here. Together. We go down fighting. Kathram was quiet for a moment. Then he did something that surprised her. He reached out and placed one massive clawed hand on her shoulder. Whatever happens, human, I'm glad I stayed. You have shown me something I never thought I would see. You have shown me that my people's choice to run was not the only option. That alone was worth dying for. Katie felt tears prick her eyes, but forced them back. There would be time for emotion later. Maybe. Rila to Morgan. The Thalaxian's voice came through the communicator, excited and afraid at the same time. The weapon is ready. But there is a problem. What problem? The frequency will only affect Vraken within a specific range. To hit the hive node, someone will need to deploy the weapon inside their perimeter. Inside the swarm itself. Katie closed her eyes. She had known this was coming. She had known from the moment Rila first described the weapon. I will do it, she said. Katie, no. Myra's voice, desperate. She had been listening to the channel. There is no one else who can. I know the terrain better than anyone. I know where the hive node is. And I am expendable. You are not expendable, Mira said fiercely. You are the reason any of us are still alive. Katie smiled sadly. Then let me finish what I started. Get the weapon ready. I am coming to you. She handed her communicator to Kethran. If I do not come back, you are in command. Hold as long as you can. Make them pay for every meter. The Dorothy nodded solemnly. It has been an honor, Katie Morgan. The honor was mine. Katie made her way through the tunnels toward Rila's position. Around her, defenders were still fighting, still holding, still refusing to break. She passed Danny, now conscious and back on his feet despite his injuries. He tried to stop her, to argue, but she just shook her head. Keep them alive until I get back, she said. And if you do not get back? Katie smiled. Then avenge me. She reached Rila's workshop and took the sonic weapon. It was smaller than she expected, a compact device that fit in her hands. Such a small thing to carry so much hope. The activation sequence is simple, Rila explained. Place it near the hive node and press this button. You will have 30 seconds to get clear. 30 seconds is not much time. Rila's gills flushed with emotion. I know, I am sorry. It was the best I could do. Katie nodded. It is enough. It has to be enough. She turned and walked toward the surface, toward the swarm, toward whatever end awaited her. Behind her, the defenders prepared for one last stand. The second day began with a discovery that changed everything. Rila Van burst into the command center just after dawn, her gills flushing with excitement. Katie looked up from the defensive plans she had been reviewing with Danny Cole, surprised by the Thalaxians' energy. "I found something," Rila announced. "In the old geological surveys. Something that might help us." She activated the holographic display and brought up a map of the tunnel network. A section deep underground was highlighted in blue. "The miners discovered this chamber 6 years ago," Rila explained. "It contains crystalline formations that produce a specific harmonic frequency when struck. The miners avoided it because the sound caused headaches and nausea." Katie studied the display. "You think this frequency affects the Vraken?" "I do not know for certain, but the Vraken are biomechanical organisms. They communicate through subsonic vibrations. If we can disrupt those vibrations, we might be able to confuse them, slow them down, maybe even hurt them." Danny leaned forward. "Can we weaponize it?" Rila nodded slowly. "I believe so. If we rig the mining equipment to amplify and broadcast the frequency, we could create a sonic weapon. But someone would have to get close to the Vraken hive node to deploy it." Very close. Katie felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. "I will do it. That is suicide," Danny said flatly. "Maybe, but if it works, it could save everyone else." Before Danny could argue further, Myra entered the command center with young Zithka following behind her. The Kelrani soldier was carrying a datapad, his compound eyes bright with urgency. "We have a problem," Myra said. Commander Voss sent a message to the evacuation fleet before he left. He recommended that no rescue be attempted regardless of the outcome here. He said that any ship entering the system would be destroyed. Katie closed her eyes. She had hoped that even if they failed, someone might come back for the survivors. Now that hope was gone. "The commander follows protocol," Zithka said quietly. "He believes emotions cloud judgment. He thinks that trying to save us would only waste more lives." "What do you think?" Katie asked. Zithka was silent for a moment. Then he straightened, his posture shifting into something proud and defiant. "I think Commander Voss is wrong," he said. "I think some things are worth risking everything for. That is why I stayed." Katie smiled despite the grim news. "Then let us make sure his pessimism is wrong. Let us give him something to regret." The day passed in a blur of preparation. Teams worked around the clock installing defensive turrets, reinforcing tunnel entrances, stockpiling weapons and supplies. The colonists who had been paralyzed by fear began to find purpose in the work. Having something to do was better than waiting to die. Katie visited each team personally, learning names, hearing stories, building connections. A Vithani cook named Trellisay prepared meals for the work crews, using the last of their fresh supplies to create something special. A Dorothy mechanic named Kethmar taught himself to maintain the human weapons, his massive claws surprisingly delicate with the unfamiliar technology. Everywhere Katie went, she saw the same thing happening. Species that had barely spoken to each other were now working side by side, teaching and learning, combining their strengths. The fear was still there, but it was no longer paralyzing. It had transformed into something else. Determination. That evening, Katie gathered the volunteers for a final briefing. They assembled in the main hall, more than 1,000 beings of different shapes and sizes, all watching her with steady eyes. "Tomorrow, the Vraken arrive," Katie said. "I will not pretend this will be easy. Many of us will not survive the next few days. But I want you to know something." She looked out at the crowd, at the faces that had become familiar over the past 2 days. At Danny Cole, steady as always. At Rieleven, brilliant and brave. At Kethran, finally ready to stop running. At young Zithka, who had chosen honor over safety. What we have built here is something new, Katie continued. This is not a Kelrani army or a Dorothy garrison or a human force. This is something that has never existed before. We are all of those things together. We are proof that different species can work as one when we choose to. She took a breath. The Vraken have destroyed civilizations, but they have never faced anything like us. They have never faced people who fight not for themselves, but for each other. They have never faced hope. Katie raised her fist. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember this moment. Remember that we chose to stand. Remember that we chose each other. That choice cannot be taken from us, no matter what comes. The crowd was silent. Then Kethran raised his own massive fist. Rieleven followed, then Zithka, then Danny, then Myra. One by one, across the hall, fists rose into the air. No one cheered. No one needed to. The gesture said everything. That night, Katie could not sleep. She walked through the empty corridors of the command center, checking systems, reviewing plans, trying to calm her racing mind. Around midnight, she found herself on the roof again, staring at the stars. The Vraken were visible now, a dark smear against the starfield, growing larger by the hour. Tomorrow they would blot out the sky. You should rest, Danny said, appearing beside her. Big day tomorrow. I tried. Could not quiet my thoughts. Danny nodded and stood with her in silence for a while. They had known each other long enough that words were not always necessary. Do you think we can win? He asked finally. Katie considered the question carefully. I think we can survive. Whether that counts as winning depends on how you define victory. And if we do not survive, then we will have shown the galaxy that the Vraken can be fought. We will have proven that running is not the only option. Maybe that will inspire others. Maybe the next colony will hold out long enough for rescue. Maybe we will be the first chapter in a story that ends with the Vraken defeated. Danny smiled. That is very human thinking. Is that a complaint? No. It is why I followed you here. They stood together until the sky began to lighten, watching the approaching darkness. Around them, the colony stirred to life as the defenders took their positions. At exactly 700 hours, the long-range sensors detected the first Vraken scouts entering the atmosphere. Katie watched the display with calm focus, her fear transformed into cold purpose. All units, this is Morgan, she announced over the colony-wide channel. The enemy is here. Remember what we are fighting for. Remember who we are fighting beside. Today we show the galaxy what we are made of. She turned to Danny. Let us go hunting. The sky above Velther Prime turned black as the Vraken descended. The monsters had arrived, and the defenders were waiting. The evacuation ships lifted off at dawn, carrying 1,500 souls toward safety. Katie Morgan watched them go from the roof of the command center, her face unreadable. Beside her stood Sergeant Danny Cole, a broad-shouldered Marine with scars on his hands and calm in his eyes. He had served with Katie for 3 years. When she told him the plan, he had simply nodded and started checking his weapons. How many stayed? Danny asked. 1,612, Katie replied. Most of them had no choice, but some did. She had been surprised by the volunteers. Chief Engineer Rieleven, a Thalaxian female with blue-green skin and gills along her neck, had announced she would remain to help modify the mining equipment. Young Zithka, a Kelrani soldier barely out of training, had defied Commander Voss and refused evacuation. Even Overseer Kethran had stayed, though he would not explain why. It was not an army. It was a collection of the abandoned and the stubborn. But it was something. Katie made her way down to the main assembly hall where the remaining colonists had gathered. The crowd was a mixture of species, all watching her with expressions ranging from terror to desperate hope. She climbed onto a platform so everyone could see her. "I know you are afraid," she began. "I am afraid too. The Vraken are coming, and everything you have heard about them is true. They are powerful. They are relentless. They have never been stopped." She paused, letting the words sink in, but neither have we. A murmur ran through the crowd. Katie continued, "I am not going to lie to you. Many of us will die in the next 3 days. Maybe all of us. But I am not asking you to die. I am asking you to fight. I am asking you to show these monsters that prey can bite back." She looked out at the alien faces watching her. "On my homeworld, humans faced extinction many times. We survived because we worked together. We survived because we refused to accept that the end was certain. We survived because we believed that tomorrow could be better than today, but only if we fought for it." Katie stepped down from the platform. "I am not your commander. I cannot order you to do anything, but I am asking you to stand with me. Not as humans and Kelrani and Dorothy and Thalaxians, just as people who refuse to be prey." The silence stretched. Then Kethran pushed through the crowd, his massive reptilian form towering over the others. "I will stand," he said simply. Rilaven stepped forward. "I will stand." One by one, others joined them. Not everyone. Some remained frozen with fear, unable to commit. But enough. Enough to give Katie hope. She split the volunteers into teams based on skills rather than species. This was a radical concept for the aliens, who had never worked in mixed groups before. But Katie insisted. If they were going to survive, they needed to combine their strengths. Danny Cole took charge of combat training. He set up a practice area in the cargo bay and began teaching basic fighting techniques to anyone willing to learn. The sessions were chaotic at first. Different species had different body structures, different instincts, different ideas about combat. Katie watched from the doorway as Danny demonstrated a defensive stance to a group of Dorothy workers. The reptilians were strong but slow, used to relying on their natural armor rather than agility. Danny was patient with them, adjusting his teaching to match their capabilities. "You do not need to be fast," he told them. "You need to be smart. Use your strength to hold ground. Let the faster fighters move around you." One of the Dorothy, a young male named Kethvolume, challenged Danny to a sparring match. The reptilian was confident, almost arrogant. He was twice Danny's size and covered in scales that could turn aside most blades. The fight lasted 3 minutes. Kethvolume knocked Danny down 7 times. Each time, the human got back up. Each time, he came at the Dorothy from a different angle, testing his defenses, learning his patterns. Finally, Danny landed a strike to a gap in Kethvol's scales, a spot near the armpit where the armor was thin. The Dorothy stumbled, surprised by the pain. Danny pressed his advantage, forcing the larger fighter to yield. But what disturbed Kethvol most was not the loss. It was the fact that Danny was smiling. "Why do you smile?" the Dorothy demanded. "I hurt you badly. You should be angry." Danny wiped blood from his lip. "I smiled because I learned something. Now I know where you are vulnerable. Next time, the fight will be shorter." The Dorothy stared at him with something like fear. "You are strange creatures, you humans." "We have been told that before," Danny agreed. Meanwhile, Rilaven worked with the engineering teams to transform the mining equipment into weapons. The colony had powerful lasers designed to cut through rock, and Rila believed they could be modified into defensive turrets. Katie found her in the main engineering bay, surrounded by disassembled machinery and tired workers. The Thalaxian was covered in grease, and her gills were fluttering with exhaustion, but her eyes were bright with determination. "How is it going?" Katie asked. Slowly, Rila admitted. Your human engineers think differently than we do. They try things even when they do not know if they will work. It is frustrating, but effective? Rila made a sound that her translator rendered as reluctant agreement. Yes, we have already found 3 solutions I would never have considered. Your people are not afraid of failure. Failure is how we learn, Katie said. On Earth, we have a saying. If at first you do not succeed, try again. My people would say, if at first you do not succeed, find someone who can, Rila replied. We do not value persistence the way you do. Katie smiled. Then let us teach each other. Your precision and our persistence. Together, we might build something that neither of us could alone. That evening, Katie toured the tunnel network with Kethran. The mining colony sat atop a vast underground complex, tunnels stretching for kilometers in every direction. It was a maze of passages and chambers, perfect for defensive warfare. Why did you stay? Katie asked as they walked through the dimly lit corridors. Kethran was quiet for a long moment. My species once faced a similar choice, he said finally. 300 years ago, when the Vraken came to our homeworld, our leaders chose to flee, to sacrifice the many so the few could escape. What happened? We survived, but we lost our world. We became refugees, scattered across the galaxy, dependent on the charity of others. Kethran stopped walking and turned to face her. I was born on a station human. I have never seen my ancestral planet except in pictures. My people have never stopped running. His yellow eyes met hers. I stayed because I wanted to know what fighting back feels like. Even if we fail, I will die knowing that I tried. Katie nodded slowly. That is why I stayed too. Not because I think we can win, but because some things are worth fighting for even when you cannot win. That night, Katie stood on the roof again, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the Vraken swarm was getting closer. In 56 hours, they would arrive. Mirasan joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the human supplies. I managed to convince the Kelrani food processor to make this, she said, handing Katie a cup. It does not taste exactly right, but it is close. Katie took a sip. It was bitter and slightly metallic, but it was warm and familiar. Thank you. The volunteers are asking about you, Myra said. They want to know more about humans, about why we think the way we do. What did you tell them? Myra smiled. I told them that humans are stubborn, optimistic fools who believe that tomorrow can always be better than today. I told them that we have a word for what we are doing here. What word? Hope, Myra said. I told them that hope is the most human thing there is. Katie looked up at the stars. The Vraken were coming. They had 2 days to prepare. The odds were impossible, but for the first time since the warning sirens began, Katie felt something other than fear. She felt ready. The warning sirens had been screaming for 3 hours when Katie Morgan finally understood that nobody was coming to save them. She stood at the observation window of the command center, watching the chaos unfold across Veltha Prime. The mining colony stretched out below her like a wounded animal. Transport ships were fighting for launch clearance, while thousands of workers from a dozen different species pushed against security barriers, desperate to escape. Katie was 34 years old. She had served in the human naval force for 12 years. She had seen combat, lost friends, and learned that the universe was far more dangerous than anyone on Earth had imagined. But nothing had prepared her for this. The Vraken were coming. Commander Thyrol Voss stood beside the main tactical display, his insectoid body clicking with nervous energy. The Kelrani officer was tall and precise, with compound eyes that could track multiple targets at once. He had commanded this garrison for 6 years without incident. Now his careful world was falling apart. The swarm will arrive in 72 hours, Voss announced to the assembled council. Current evacuation capacity allows for transport of approximately 1,500 individuals. Colony population is 3,047. The room erupted into argument. Counselors from different species shouted over each other, each demanding priority for their own people. Katie watched them with growing disgust. These were supposed to be leaders. Overseer Catherine slammed his clawed fist on the table. The Dorothy administrator was reptilian and massive, with scales the color of dried blood. The Dorothy workers represent 40% of mining output. Logic dictates we receive 40% of evacuation slots. Your logic serves only yourself, hissed Ambassador Trull, a slender Vithani whose pale skin shifted colors with emotion. The Vithani delegation includes 3 scientists with irreplaceable knowledge. We must be prioritized. Katie felt Myra-san move closer to her. The human diplomat was shorter than Katie, with kind eyes that hid a sharp mind. They had become friends over the past months, united by their status as outsiders in this alien place. They are going to tear each other apart before the Vrak can even arrive, Myra whispered. Katie nodded but said nothing. She was watching Commander Voss. The Kelrani officer had stopped participating in the argument. He was staring at his tactical display with the stillness of someone who had already accepted defeat. She knew that look. She had seen it on the faces of soldiers who had given up. The Vrakin were the nightmare of the galaxy. They were not a species in any normal sense. They were a swarm, a biological machine that consumed worlds and moved on. In 300 years of recorded encounters, no colony had ever survived a full swarm assault. The Galactic Union's official policy was simple. Evacuate who you can and abandon the rest. Katie had read the reports. She had seen the images of worlds stripped bare, of civilizations reduced to dust. The Vrakin did not negotiate. They did not show mercy. They simply fed. And now they were coming here. Lieutenant Commander Morgan. Katie turned. Commander Voss was addressing her directly, something he rarely did. The Kelrani considered humans to be young and inexperienced, barely worth acknowledging. Your species has 23 personnel on this colony, Voss said. I am prepared to guarantee full evacuation for all humans in exchange for your cooperation in maintaining order during the boarding process. The room went quiet. Every alien eye turned to Katie. She understood what Voss was offering. He wanted human soldiers to hold back the crowds while the chosen few escaped. He was offering her people safety in exchange for helping condemn others to death. Katie looked at Myra. The diplomat's face was carefully neutral, but Katie could see the tension in her shoulders. I appreciate the offer, Commander, Katie said slowly, but I need to understand the full situation before I can respond. Voss made a clicking sound that his translator rendered as impatience. The situation is simple. We cannot save everyone. Difficult choices must be made. Difficult for who? Katie asked. You have already decided who lives and who dies. You are asking me to help enforce that decision. I am asking you to be practical, Voss replied. Sentiment will not stop the Vrakin. Katie nodded slowly. You are right. Sentiment will not stop them. She paused. But neither will running. The council members exchanged confused glances. Catherine leaned forward, his yellow eyes narrowing. What are you suggesting, human? Katie took a breath. She was about to say something that would change everything, and she knew it. There would be no taking it back. I am suggesting that we stop fighting each other for seats on evacuation ships and start fighting the actual enemy. Silence. Then Ambassador Trull laughed, a high and brutal sound. You cannot be serious. The Vrakin have destroyed civilizations that existed before your species learned to walk upright. What could humans possibly do against them? We could stand, Katie said simply. We could fight. We could show them that not everyone runs. Commander Voss shook his head. Admirable sentiment, Lieutenant Commander. But the Vraken cannot be defeated through bravery. They are a force of nature. You might as well try to fight a hurricane. Humans have survived hurricanes, Katie replied. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. We are still here, not because we were the strongest or the fastest, but because we refused to give up. She looked around the room at the alien faces watching her. Some showed contempt, others showed curiosity. A few showed something that might have been hope. I am not asking anyone to die for a lost cause, Katie continued. I am asking if anyone wants to try something that has never been done before. I am asking if anyone wants to stand instead of run. And if we stand and die anyway? Kethran asked. Katie met his eyes. Then we die on our feet instead of running. We die protecting each other instead of fighting each other. We die as something more than prey. The room remained silent. Katie could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. She had spoken out of turn. She had challenged their accepted wisdom. She had suggested the impossible. Then Mira-san stepped forward. The humans will stay, Myra announced. All 23 of us. We will not take any evacuation slots. Anyone who wants to fight beside us is welcome. Anyone who wants to run is free to go. Commander Voss stared at them for a long moment. Then he turned back to his tactical display. The evacuation will proceed, he said flatly. Those who wish to remain may do so. I will note your decision in my final report. The council began to disperse, alien officials hurrying away to secure their own escape. Katie watched them go with a mixture of sadness and determination. That was either very brave or very stupid, Myra said quietly. Probably both, Katie admitted. She looked out the window at the frightened colony below. Somewhere out there, workers who had no hope of evacuation were waiting to die. But I could not live with myself if I ran. Could you? Myra shook her head. No, I could not. Katie's communicator beeped. She checked the message and felt her heart sink. News from Earth, she said. Reinforcements are en route, but they will not arrive for 5 days. The Vraken will be here in 3. Yes, Myra took a deep breath. So, we are on our own. Katie looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, a swarm of monsters was racing toward them, hungry and unstoppable. And she had just volunteered to stand in their way with nothing but determination and hope. We are on our own, she agreed. But at least we are standing together.